This story began as a dream of a better life, but turned into a tragedy that destroyed everything that had been so carefully built. They made plans, saved money, dreamed of the future, but one disappearance, and with it all their savings, turned everything upside down. The search for truth that followed proved shocking. No one was prepared for it. Summer 2023. In Central City, everyone knew 26-year-old Michael Miller and 24-year-old Emily Carter as an inseparable couple, united by a common goal. They grew up in the same neighborhood and had been together since childhood. Friends described them as quiet but determined. They rarely socialized, preferring long hours of work and relentless saving. Their dream was simple but ambitious: to leave Ohio and start a new life in Dallas, Texas. Michael worked full-time at Apex Auto, a small auto repair shop on Riverside Street. Emily rushed to work every morning at Save Mart on Washington Avenue, where she worked as a cashier. Their income was modest, but they worked hard, and by the summer of 2023, they had managed to save $1,300. The money was kept in a joint bank account at First National Bank and in a metal box under the bed, where the cash was stored. On the morning of July 3, 2023, Emily left the house around 7:40 a.m. Michael watched her, dressed in her work uniform, with her bag over her shoulder, heading to work. He watched her go, looking forward to the evening when they would be together again. Around 1 p.m. during his lunch break, Michael sent Emily a message, but there was no response. His heart began to race with anxiety. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. He called Save Mart, where the manager informed him that Emily had never shown up for work. That same evening, Michael, his voice trembling, filed a missing person report with the Chicago Police Department. A desperate search began. He called hospitals, searched the neighborhood, and posted flyers, hoping for a miracle. He even contacted the local NBC affiliate, begging anyone with information to come forward. In his eyes, hope mixed with despair. He believed Emily would return. For several days, Emily's disappearance remained a mystery, considered as a possible voluntary departure. There were no signs of forced entry at the couple's home. Strangely, Emily's personal belongings were missing: her ID, makeup bag, and overnight bag. Police noted that her side of the closet appeared half empty. The turning point came on July 10th, when Michael received a disturbing fraud alert from First National Bank. The bank had detected a cash withdrawal at an ATM in Columbus, Ohio, for the substantial sum of $9,800. This was more than 160 miles from Chicago. On July 12th, a second withdrawal followed, for $3,000, at a store ATM in Oklahoma City. Both transactions were made using Emily Carter's debit card. Hotel guest records and transaction data led investigators to a motel in Columbus. Staff confirmed that the room had been booked under the name Linda Davis. The guest paid with a prepaid Visa card purchased in Chicago a week prior. A review of registration logs and witness interviews revealed that the guest stayed at the motel for 2 nights and checked out without notifying staff. A review of surveillance video from the motel entrance revealed an unexpected truth. The recording showed Emily exiting the building on July 5th, holding hands with a man. He was described as black, around 40 years old, with a beard and a noticeable tattoo on his neck. Both were dressed in casual clothing and carrying backpacks. They got into a rideshare vehicle shortly after 11 a.m. During a subsequent interrogation, Michael was shown the recording for identification. His face paled as he recognized the man as James Wilson, Emily's maternal uncle. Wilson was 45 years old. He had been released from state prison in early 2023 after serving 6 years for wire fraud and identity theft. Although James briefly re-established contact with his niece after his release, Michael had repeatedly expressed concerns about his influence and motives. Digital forensics added the final touch to this dramatic picture. Recovered from a drafts folder in a CloudSync mobile notebook, A note read, "James will pick me up on the way out. Everything will be quick. He will think I was kidnapped. Everything will be settled in a week. The main thing is to withdraw money before the account is frozen." This draft, saved in the computer's memory from July 1st at 10:17 p.m., revealed a chilling plan. A plan, carefully thought out, involved deceit and a coordinated operation to quickly withdraw funds. Every phrase screamed that Emily Carter was going to fake her disappearance, and that James Wilson, if not the chief architect of this nightmare, was at least aware of it. On July 14th, police officially confirmed the worst fears. Emily Carter and James Wilson were now figures in a financial crime case involving the illegal transfer of funds from an account. Emily was no longer considered missing in the traditional sense. James Wilson was added to the list of people being searched for across state lines. Emily, according to the investigation, had disappeared voluntarily, possibly involved in the fraud. 2 weeks of silence. No sign of Emily. No sign of James. Not the slightest hint of bank activity. The safe under the bed in their apartment was empty, like a silent witness to betrayal. On July 20th, Michael Miller, called in for questioning again, looked worn out. There was no hope in his eyes anymore. "I think she planned everything," he said quietly, his voice shaking with pain. "But I don't think she understood what she was getting into with him." Michael remained at the center of the investigation, but no longer as a suspect. He was a key witness, a source of information, providing context. He gave investigators full access to his bank accounts, joint accounts with Emily, their shared laptop, and his phone. Investigators noted that his behavior, his sincerity, was consistent with someone unaware of the scheme. Michael described the events in detail, confirming his words with GPS data from his work and surveillance camera footage. His account of James Wilson's manipulative behavior added weight to the picture forming in the investigators' minds. With the help of Uber transaction logs obtained by court order, detectives confirmed that on July 5th, Emily and James left the motel in Columbus and headed to the regional bus terminal. That same day, 2 bus tickets were purchased in the names of Robert Martin and Jennifer Anderson. The payment was made in cash. The final destination of the route was Green Valley. Since July 18th, local authorities and representatives from Green Valley had been in close contact after investigators tracked down a short-term rental of a cabin located about 10 miles southeast of the town, near Bethel Acres. The rental agreement, drawn up under fake names, perfectly matched the timeline of the bus trip. The property owners described the renters as a quiet couple, a man in his 40s and a young woman. They checked in on July 6th and checked out 3 days later, without requesting cleaning services and avoiding contact with neighbors. On July 19th, a warrant to search the cabin was obtained, and the results were disturbing. In a small fire pit behind the house, officers found a partially melted cell phone casing. In the bathroom, they found discarded women's clothing, including a brand-name shirt matching the colors of the Save Mart uniform. Food scraps and receipts from a nearby gas station dated July 7th helped narrow down the timeline. Fingerprint analysis confirmed Emily Carter's presence at the location. Unfortunately, no identifiable fingerprints of Wilson were found. It is important to note that there was no blood or obvious signs of violence in the cabin, but the burned phone and the hasty departure, they screamed of something terrible. Investigators no longer believed in Emily's long-term escape plan. The working theory became that she may have changed her mind or tried to escape from James Wilson. The shift from financial fraud to possible kidnapping or murder officially occurred on July 24th, when a fisherman discovered human remains near the Mississippi River in Clark County, Ohio, about 30 miles south of Green Valley. The body was wrapped in a blue tarp and weighed down with concrete blocks. The state of decomposition was severe. Initial identification was made by a small, heart-shaped tattoo on the victim's left wrist and a silver bracelet engraved with the initials EC. The district attorney's office confirmed the remains belonged to 24-year-old Emily Carter. The official autopsy revealed that the cause of death was manual strangulation. The approximate time of death was about 6 weeks before discovery, which puts it in mid-July, just days after the couple left the motel in Columbus. With this horrifying confirmation, the case was officially reclassified as a murder. James Wilson, with his dark past and last meetings with his niece, became the main suspect in her murder. Law enforcement issued a verdict. He is a threat, a fugitive. On July 25th, his name appeared on a nationwide arrest warrant. U.S. federal marshals joined the hunt. Investigators began to suspect that the financial machinations may have been initiated under James's influence, but Emily was not free in her choices. Experts from the U.S. Department of Justice's Behavioral Analysis Unit confirmed the worst fears. They suggested that Wilson, taking advantage of family trust, used psychological pressure to control Emily. Meanwhile, Michael Miller, Emily's friend, continued to cooperate with the investigation. He provided personal messages sent by Emily shortly before her disappearance. The increasingly insistent presence of the uncle and his suggestions for a new life elsewhere were becoming apparent. In a message dated June 29th, she wrote, "He says a lot of good things, but I'm not sure I trust it. It's just fast." By the end of July, Michael had withdrawn from the public eye. He declined interviews, limiting himself to a brief statement through his lawyer. "I always felt something was wrong. I didn't want to believe she could do this to me, and now I know she couldn't. Emily was used, and now she's gone. I want justice for her." By early August 2023, the investigation into Emily Carter's murder had grown into a multi-state operation. With James Wilson identified as the prime suspect, law enforcement agencies in Ohio, Oklahoma, and Texas joined forces. The U.S. Marshal Service took over the lead in the manhunt. Wilson had vanished after Emily's presumed murder, traveling under assumed names. His history of fraud included using aliases, prepaid cards, and burner phones, tactics he seemed to be employing again. Tips poured in from various states, but most turned out to be false leads. Wilson had seemingly disappeared into thin air. He had no car, avoided digital footprints, and seemed to shun major cities. Looking for new clues, investigators turned their attention once more to the cabin near Green Valley, the last place Emily and James had been seen together. On August 5th, during a second search, detectives discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards in the bedroom. There, in a duffel bag, were personal items, silent witnesses to the tragedy. Among them was a cracked smartphone without a SIM card, clothing belonging to Emily, and a small, but ultimately invaluable, handwritten notebook. It was Emily Carter's diary. The short entries, some abruptly cut off, spanned from July 2nd to July 8th. They offered a window into her state of mind, revealing her growing doubts about the escape plan. One entry from July 7th stood out in particular. Like a cry from the heart, it read, "James isn't who I thought he was. I feel trapped. I miss Dean. I want to go home." These sparse lines became a key to understanding the tragedy. They suggested that Emily may have initially gone with James willingly, but her decision had later changed, turning into a painful desire to return to her former life. Investigators concluded that, by the time of her death, Emily likely no longer wanted to stay, but she wasn't allowed to leave. Meanwhile, financial analysts, reviewing bank records, stumbled upon disturbing patterns. After July 10th, the presumed date of Emily's death, cash withdrawals were being recorded at ATMs in central and southern Texas. All were linked to prepaid debit cards tied to the couple's stolen funds. A breakthrough came on August 1st in Houston. ATM video footage captured a man whose general description matched Wilson's, although his hair was longer and his beard styled differently. The camera caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his neck, identical to one in previous photos. This was irrefutable proof. Wilson was alive and in Texas. Authorities immediately issued updated alerts throughout the state. The search focused on small towns, bus routes, and stores where Wilson might try to blend in. Further tracking of financial transactions showed that cash withdrawals continued in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Toledo. Purchases included necessities, food, fuel, and prepaid mobile cards. Investigators believed that Wilson was likely trying to reach Laredo, a known departure point for fugitives seeking to cross the border into Mexico. In Chicago, police released the contents of Emily's diary and interviewed former associates of Wilson. One of his former cellmates described him as a man of exceptional intelligence, patient, and always plotting. A parole officer added that Wilson had a disturbing habit. He targeted vulnerable women in his family. 2 previous incidents involving the financial exploitation of female relatives in 2014 and 2016 hadn't led to charges, but now, with the new circumstances, they took on a sinister hue. As the search narrowed to southern Texas, border control was placed on high alert. Wilson was considered a potential flight risk. Posters with his photograph, both current and a digitally aged version, were displayed at bus stations, shelters, and border checkpoints. By August 15th, law enforcement felt they were closing in. Surveillance from a truck stop in Toledo captured a man matching Wilson's description getting into a ride-sharing vehicle. Officers arrived within the hour, but the car was already gone. However, the transaction was traced back to a prepaid phone registered in Houston just days prior. It was one of the last threads leading to the unraveling. At approximately 10:47 a.m., officers from the Laredo Police Department located and apprehended Wilson without incident. He was standing near a side entrance of a gas station, attempting a second cash withdrawal. A search of Wilson revealed 3 state-issued identification cards under different names, 5 prepaid debit cards, and $1,840 in mixed currency. His appearance had been meticulously altered, featuring longer hair dyed dark, a clean-shaven face, and plain, oversized clothing. Wilson was taken to the Franklin County Detention Center and held on a federal warrant for interstate flight to avoid prosecution. Later that day, Chicago detectives arrived in Laredo to conduct an initial interview. Wilson waived his right to legal counsel and agreed to speak. Initial interrogation, unveiling the darkness. The first round of interrogation began with cold denials. Wilson, like an icy statue, denied any involvement in the death of Emily Carter. He claimed that after leaving the cabin near Green Valley, Emily had second thoughts about continuing their scheme, and they agreed to part ways. He portrayed her as apprehensive, but insisted that he had last seen her alive. This version of events, however, cracked under the weight of the evidence. Travel records, silent witnesses, and the diary recovered from the cabin's depths contradicted his words. I watched as the detectives presented excerpts from Emily's personal diary. Her words, like a cry from the soul, described her feeling trapped, her longing for Michael Miller. At that moment, Wilson's mask faltered. His face contorted, he visibly grew nervous, and his defense became fierce. When confronted with surveillance footage from Houston and Toledo, he paused, like a cornered animal, before requesting a break. Upon returning, he was a different man. Wilson offered a confession. In his statement, flowing from his lips like an icy stream, he admitted to murdering Emily Carter on or about July 10, 2023. The decision, he said, was made when Emily began to doubt the plan and expressed a desire to contact Michael. She spoke of turning back, and Wilson uttered the fateful words, "She made a mistake. I couldn't let that happen." He told investigators that Emily had asked how long they would need to stay off the grid and whether they would be able to retrieve the remaining money. In these words, he saw a threat, a shadow of impending doom that would shatter his freedom. Given his parole status and past convictions for fraud, he feared that exposure would send him back to prison. Wilson confessed to strangling Emily in the cabin's bedroom while she slept. He claimed it took less than a minute, describing it as a swift and necessary action. There was no remorse in his voice. "I did what I had to do. She changed the plan," he told the detectives. After the murder, Wilson wrapped Emily's body in a tarp found behind the cabin and stowed it in the trunk of the borrowed vehicle. He drove south and disposed of the body in the Mississippi River, weighing it down with concrete blocks. Emily's phone was discarded, and the car was cleaned. He continued to cash checks from the prepaid cards. Investigators later corroborated details of this route using toll and gas purchase data. James Wilson's confession formed the backbone of the timeline constructed by investigators, confirming the horrifying truth. Emily died shortly after attempting to break free from a vicious cycle, and her death was premeditated, cold-blooded, and not impulsive or driven by self-defense. Authorities emphasized that Wilson had meticulously planned his actions, researching interstate extradition laws and methods of concealing evidence, utilizing public Wi-Fi networks in Columbus and Green Valley. On September 8, 2023, James Wilson was formally indicted in Franklin County on the most serious charges: first-degree murder, financial fraud, and interstate flight. Under heavy guard, he was extradited to Ohio and incarcerated in the Jackson County Jail in Chicago, where he was denied bail. Wilson's confession marked the culmination of the investigation, answering the agonizing questions that had haunted investigators and Emily's loved ones. A financial scheme that began with selfish intentions spiraled into a monstrous murder fueled by a lust for control, a fear of exposure, and a calculated desire to eliminate a perceived liability. Prosecutors publicly confirmed that Wilson acted alone, and there were no other suspects in the case. The ramifications of Emily's death extended far beyond the courtroom. Human rights organizations have highlighted this case as a prime example of family and financial abuse faced by young people. Her fatal mistake was trusting someone she thought was reliable, and her subsequent attempt to break free from his grasp led to a tragic end. For Michael Miller, devastated by grief, the conviction brought only confirmation, not solace. His lawyer issued a brief statement, laced with pain. She didn't deserve to die for changing her mind. She didn't deserve to be treated this way. The trial of James Wilson began on October 23, 2023, at the Jackson County Courthouse in Chicago, Ohio. Given the widespread public outcry and intense interest in the murder of Emily Carter, access to the courtroom was limited, and the proceedings were meticulously covered by local and national media. Security was heightened throughout the trial, underscoring the seriousness and tension that permeated the courtroom. The charges against Wilson sounded like a sentence: first-degree murder, financial fraud, identity theft, and fleeing prosecution. He stood trial, clenching his teeth, and denied all charges. His lawyer insisted on a bench trial, but the prosecution, sensing the strength of the evidence, demanded otherwise. After 3 long days of jury selection, 12 individuals ready to deliver their verdict were chosen. An 8-day marathon began, where prosecutors from the Jackson County District Attorney's Office unfolded a picture of horror before them. The case was built on irrefutable evidence: physical evidence, digital forensics, and chilling confessions from Wilson himself. The prosecution, like a skilled artist, painted a portrait of cold-blooded planning, manipulation, and greed. The following were presented as key pieces of evidence. A handwritten diary of Emily Carter, found in a secluded cabin near Green Valley, Ohio. The pages, full of hopes and fears, now stood as witnesses to her tragic fate. Surveillance footage capturing Wilson at ATMs in Texas, ruthlessly cashing out money from prepaid cards. Bank statements and SIM card data, revealing the details of a meticulously planned disappearance. GPS data, silently confirming that Wilson and Emily were together after her last confirmed contact. A transcript and video of Wilson's full confession, where he, struggling to find the words, admitted to strangling Emily when she wanted to go home. The prosecutors, like blacksmiths, forged their arguments, emphasizing how Wilson, using family connections, gained Emily's trust, and then, like a spider, lured her into his web, stealing over $14,000. When she dared to question him and talked about leaving, he, like a predator, killed her to cover up his crimes and avoid punishment. The defense, in turn, acknowledging Wilson's involvement in the fraudulent scheme, attempted to mitigate his guilt, arguing that the murder was not premeditated. The lawyer, painting a picture of a miserable man, cited his difficult childhood, trauma, prison past, and unstable mental state. They tried to cast doubt on the timeline of Emily's death, arguing that the murder was the result of panic, not a carefully planned scheme. They insisted that Wilson's confession was made under duress, in a state of extreme emotional distress. The fourth day of the trial was marked by the appearance of Michael Miller in the courtroom. He stood before the jury to tell the story of his life with Emily. His words, calm and measured, were filled with deep pain. He spoke of their shared dreams, the financial sacrifices they had made, every day lived filled with hopes and plans. His voice was filled with despair as he described the betrayal he experienced when he discovered the initial disappearance plan. His heart bled when he realized that Emily was no longer there. "We were building our world," he began, his voice trembling. "We had nothing, but we believed that everything was ahead of us. This money is not just numbers on an account. It's years of labor. It's our dreams. She didn't just disappear. She trusted the wrong person, and he ruthlessly took advantage of that." He paused, taking a deep breath, trying to contain the emotions that overwhelmed him. Following him, Emily's friends and relatives testified. They painted a portrait of a cheerful, trusting woman who sought to break free from the grip of poverty and build a bright future. Some of them emphasized that James Wilson was not part of her life until his release from prison. On October 31st, 2023, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. James Wilson was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, financial fraud, and interstate flight. The next day, Judge Linda Thomas addressed Wilson directly. Her voice was firm and merciless. "You abused the trust placed in you as a family member and shattered it in the most horrific way. This wasn't a crime committed in the heat of the moment. It was a meticulously planned scheme of exploitation that led to an irreparable tragedy." Wilson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In addition, the court ordered him to pay financial restitution for the stolen funds, to be passed on in inheritance to Emily Carter. The judge ordered that Wilson serve his sentence at Riverbend Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in eastern Ohio. Following the sentencing, the district attorney's office held a press conference, calling the case a cautionary tale of financial exploitation within families. Representatives from organizations advocating for victims of financial crimes expressed their gratitude for the thoroughness of the investigation and the transparency of the judicial process. After the sentencing of James Wilson, the news cycle went quiet. While the court had delivered its verdict, for those closest to Emily Carter, the wounds remained unhealed. Among them was Michael Miller. He chose not to attend the sentencing. No public statements, no interviews, no comments. He retreated into himself, trying to cope with the pain. By early 2024, Michael was working at a tire repair and lubrication shop in the West End business district of Dallas. The manager told reporters that Michael came in every day, kept to himself, but did his job diligently. He rarely spoke about the past, but a small framed photograph of Emily always sat in his toolbox. Colleagues noted that while he seemed distant, he was never rude. Clients who interacted with him described him as polite and methodical. In Ohio, the Carter case continued to serve as a training example for law enforcement officers and victim advocacy workshops. The Ohio Department of Public Safety added Emily Carter's name to the official registry of domestic violence fatalities. In February 2024, Emily's family held a private memorial, gathering the closest loved ones. The press was not invited. In a short, haltingly prepared statement, Emily's mother said, "She was too trusting. He saw that and exploited it until he killed her." Her voice trembled, her eyes filled with tears. The final report on the case, declassified by the court in March 2024, confirmed investigators' worst fears. James Wilson had deliberately targeted his niece. After being released from prison in early 2023, Wilson re-entered Emily's life, feigning a desire to reconnect and offer family support. But investigators uncovered evidence that he had already begun planning a financial scheme to exploit her and her partner. Text messages, browsing history, and transaction records revealed a pattern of manipulation that began months before the disappearance. Forensic psychologists later characterized Wilson's behavior as calculated opportunism, masked by familial ties. His approach followed a practiced strategy: gain trust, isolate the victim, and then present a risky plan disguised as a solution to a difficult situation. Additional materials revealed a disturbing truth. Wilson had attempted similar schemes involving other female relatives in 2014 and 2016. In both instances, he proposed joint financial ventures, requesting access to their funds. While these episodes did not result in physical violence or lead to formal charges, the records were presented in court as evidence and released to the public following the sentencing. Emily's story became part of training materials distributed by organizations fighting domestic violence. Although the case was not initially framed within the context of romantic coercion, advocates emphasized that Wilson's methods, the stages of isolation, financial control, and psychological pressure, mirrored tactics often used in cases of intimate partner violence. Michael Miller, broken by the loss, largely disappeared from public life after his move. A year later, on July 10, 2024, the anniversary of Emily's death, he posted a short, grief-stricken message on his private social media account that quickly circulated among friends. "She didn't leave. She was taken, and I will never forgive myself for not seeing it." These were his last public words about the tragedy. At the Dallas auto shop where Michael now works, a small sign hangs above the counter. In a modest black frame, a simple but profound phrase is engraved: "Trust is built, never borrowed." Most customers don't notice it, but those who know the story understand. It's a silent echo of everything Michael can no longer say aloud. It is his personal monument to a lost trust, forever etched in his soul.